Hello and welcome to How the Race Was Won for 2025. Dane Cash here. Before we get into breaking down the Omloop Het Nieuwsblad, you should know that How the Race Was Won is a lot more than a podcast this year. You can still listen to it. You can still do what you're about to do and have all of the racing analysis in your ears. But you should know that How the Race Was Won is now, well, we're now a live post-race show with video and everything. So what you're listening to is actually just the audio from that video. And yeah, you can still listen to it and enjoy it in just your ears, but you should know that you can also go watch this show over on the Escape Collective YouTube, and that's going to be the case in the coming weeks as well. After Strade Bianche, we'll be back live shortly after the race to break down the action, all on YouTube, and it's pretty fun. You should check it out. So yeah, enjoy the audio-only version of How the Race Was Won. Just know that How the Race Was Won is a lot more than that now that we are a live video post-race show. All right. Well, hopefully we'll see you over on YouTube. I've been waiting to say this. Welcome back to How the Race Was Won podcast. Also live broadcasts.
Live
video.
Live studio post-race. YouTube,
yeah. I mean,
Instagram,
if you're listening to this 2 days later, you're going to wonder what we're talking about. We'll get down. We'll talk about that in a bit, but we don't want to waste any time. First of all, I'm Dane Cash. You are Cosmo Catalano, quick racing analyst extraordinaire. I'm so glad to see you again here for opening weekend. How are you?
I'm great, Dan. Always up for an Omloop Nieuwsblad. No longer Omloop Het Nieuwsblad.
It's not the first World Tour race of the year, but I think you saw today all the fans on the road. Why we like to talk about it as opening weekend, and it ended up being a very surprising finish. What is the headline? What's our first headline for the How the Race Was Won podcast / live show of the whole year? What are we going with?
Maybe we should start calling it Group 1 syndrome or G1 syndrome.
That is just chef's kiss. I'm doing a chef. If you're listening 2 days later, you're going to miss out on all this video action here. Chef's kiss. Maybe we should define our terms.
Yeah, sure.
For the viewers. Well, first of all, what's Group 2 syndrome?
Yeah, traditionally we talk about Group 2 syndrome, which is where there is a group of riders that is not the first group on the road. It is larger than the first group, stronger than the first group, but doesn't want to do any work because no one in Group 2 wants to be the person that brings back Group 1 so that someone else in Group 2 can win the race. That is Group 2 syndrome, G2 syndrome. And
today at the Omloop Het Nieuwsblad, what do we see?
We saw a lot of people at the front of the race who seemed entirely happy to be at the front of the race. Didn't really work too much to break things up. People who were pulling were happy to pull. And that was pretty much the state of affairs for 90-ish% of the day.
Yeah. We saw, I think Group 1, the real failures of Group 1 probably fall on the shoulders of one team more than most. Yes.
Yeah, I would say.
I'm going to pull up a photo of the sprint here. Now, there's a guy in the middle of this sprint, okay, that we're going to show. So, nice photo from Corvos here. Guy in the middle of that sprint, Jasper Philipsen, winner of Milan-San Remo last year. I think he's the guy that his team was pulling for all day. But as you can see from this photo, if you look really closely, you will see that he is not crossing the line first. That is a key difference between the plan that they had and what actually happened. Instead, Soren Varenskjold takes the shocking win. He told us after the race, not us, he didn't tell us personally, but he said on the interview after the race that he wasn't even planning to be there. He was a last-minute replacement for Marcus Holgaard, I think. Ended up taking the win in a sprint that I think most people didn't expect. It helped that there was a headwind. Why? Why didn't Alpecin win? Or why not Paul Magnier, who was right here as well? What happened? Why did this Group 1 not deliver?
Well, it's an interesting story, Dane. Let's tell them how the race was won.
Yeah, do we want to do that? Yeah. So we'll dive into how the race was won. Also, I'll just tell folks, because I said we would do this. We are on video. We're on YouTube. Watch us on YouTube so that you can see the great images that we're showing here. But also, we're going to show some highlights. We're going to break down some stuff so the Cosmo can actually point to stuff going on screen, which is a little bit better than a traditional podcast. Where
I can point to it. You're not going to see it, though. I just have to talk about it.
You can see it if you're on the video, though. That's the wonderful thing. So, Group 1 syndrome sets in, and Soren Varenskjold wins the race. Jasper Philipsen, Paul Magnier left frustrated. Paul Magnier in particular, very frustrated. At the moment of the finish, I think the commentators thought he was celebrating the win, when in fact he was actually not. He was very unhappy. How do we get to this point of these riders who were maybe supposed to win not winning. How was the race won?
Yeah. Home Moped and East Blood is kind of, for those who don't know, cobbled classic, steep climbs, cobbled sections. Not as big as Tours Flanders, covers a lot of the same ground. Started with a pretty typical breakaway, 7 riders, 6 minutes up when the cameras turned on at 100K to go. Just very, very typical until 92K out, when on the Longa Munta flat section of cobbles, UAE attacked. Not really sure why. There were some Visma guys who were out of position, but it didn't really do anything except make the group seriously stressed out, kind of shoulder to shoulder, but not riding fast for the next 20K. Then kind of a truce broke out. The break got a lot more room. A bunch of people went off the back, including Arnaud Delis, to get some mechanicals. And unfortunately for him, around 60K to go, the pace picked back up, and he was not there. Around 52K to go, you have kind of this more of a traditional classics launching point. Visma tried some stuff on the Theo Jorgensen, but nothing really stuck till Josh Tarling went clear for Ineos, and it was really well timed. At least for him anyway. He's not great on the super steep stuff. Alpecin chased pretty much everything after that for the rest of the race. There was a split over the Molenberg at 40K to go. Wout van Aert was distanced, and Alpecin drove that, and everything came back together. 28K to go. Wout, the break, Tarling, everybody. A couple of attacks, and then a K or two later, it was all Alpecin on the front once again.
At that moment, we're chatting before the race because we're talking on Slack as we're planning this show for you, dear listeners, trying to figure out how to bring you the best analysis, trying to figure out what is the headline. And at that moment, I'm thinking, oh, the headline is Alpecin doing all this work now, discouraging attacks, so that half an hour from now, we're about to see Jasper Philipsen sprint to the victory. I was thinking that's what it's going to be because they were doing, it seemed like, everything right at that juncture.
I don't know if I fully agree that it was right, but it's certainly, the plan made sense. I thought that, something was going to happen over the Mur van Gerardsbergen where it normally does, right?
Yes.
We saw the pace kind of pick up leading into it. We saw last year's winner, Jan Tratnik, he flatted, kind of running into it, which maybe took Red Bull a little bit out of the game. But yeah, we saw Matthias Vacek ride to the front for Lidl Trek and kind of just stomp up the thing unchallenged. Over the top, you normally see, if not the race winning separation, you see a group really, you're there, you're in the first group or you're in the second group or you're not in the race anymore. And what we saw, if you look at the Warren Scholl Chase picture there.
Oh yeah, let me pull that up. Yeah. Yep.
What you saw was a pretty big group up front, and then guys in ones and twos chasing their way back on, including one Soren Warrenskold from Uno X right here.
Yeah, he's the guy in the McDonald's colors right there.
Yeah, the
way behind the rest of the big favorites, but crucially, not so far behind as to be gone. Not out.
Yeah, I mean the group again, like there wasn't a lot of the group doing stuff. If you go to the Bosberg PNG image, this is closer to the Bosberg. You'll see
final climb.
This is leading into the final climb of the race. There are two groups that are pretty huge for this point in the race, more or less right next to each other. It just didn't seem like anybody in this first group felt particularly interested in getting away, especially because they had Philipsen in there. You had to think somebody had some plan to do something.
Yeah, you can see in this shot, I mean, you can see riders and also just knowing that they're there. You can say, I think it's fair to ask, why aren't they doing anything here? Because in this moment where you've got a split, you've got a larger group behind you chasing, but you have a split and you're approaching this final climb of the race. If you're UAE, which has a several really strong riders, but who need to get away, they're not going to win a sprint. If you're, I guess Visma trusted in Wout van Aert to sprint at this thing, but they had Jorgensen here and they just kind of didn't take advantage.
There were occasional efforts that Tim Wellens tried to kick off an attack around the time Warren Scholl was getting back in, but I don't think anyone wanted to do it that close to the Bosberg.
I think he's the guy at the front of the shot here. Yeah, I think so. So yeah.
And if you go to, we're not quite there yet. If you right after the Bosberg, you had Jorgensen and Wout van Aert trying to do a 1-2 of some variety and just didn't quite seem to hit. There were people were ready for it. People were watching for it. And one of the persons who was watching for it, was Stefan Kung from Groupama FDG. You want to jump to that picture?
Yeah, let's go to the
Kung attack.
What seemed like an attack that could win for
Yeah.
a little bit there.
So we're looking at a helicopter shot of two groups coming back together.
Yeah, there you go.
This is right after Jorgensen's attack. And if you imagine you're looking at a Belgian road with a little dog leg in it, and there's kind of 11 guys, a little split in the middle, and a big dude in blue attacking straight down, and everyone in that group kind of looking around. And then just behind them, there is a group of 6 riders. In that group, you actually had Matteo Trentin, and you had Soren Marshall's teammate, who's, I think he's an Andreasen. Where is the...
Yeah, we had of the
Jonas Abrahamsen. Thank you.
Abrahamsen was the Uno X rider. Yeah.
But both of those riders would, shortly after this group came back together, would try to go off the front. But here they are not quite in touch. And because of that, Stefan Kung basically goes away and no one's on his wheel.
They didn't even really, like, it wasn't, you couldn't really even say, oh, nobody can follow him, because nobody seemed to really try that much.
Well, yeah, it's people tried. It was just after he was gone. And if you think about
yes,
if you think about past Umloop at Nice, like, this is a major winning pattern at this race. Even just last year, you had a big, powerful guy like Nils Pollitt get away with Jan Tratnik, who is not a sprinter by any means, but certainly can finish a race. I think back to Luca Paolini and Steen Vandenberg in 2013. Like, this is definitely how these things have worked out in the past. Seems like a great opportunity, and just no one was there to take it except for Kung, who for the first 5-6K after he made this attack really looked like he was going to get away and win the race.
Yeah, I think, again, to go back to our Slack conversation, just to give people some insight into what's going through the head of the people currently talking to you right now. An hour ago, I'm thinking Alpesen's going to win the race, and then, maybe Stefan Kung's going to win the race. That's not what happened. It wasn't like there was... it's hard to pinpoint a single moment where, like, oh, you know what, Kung's getting caught, but it seemed like it really lost steam. His solo move lost steam, like, I don't know, maybe 6K out.
See, I don't think it lost steam. I think what happened was Group 2 syndrome really kind of failed to happen. Like, you still had Alpecin with all of their 1 or 2 remaining guys trying to chase, but then you had Visma came up, did some chasing, I think for 3-4K to go. Uno X got in there to chase. I mean, everybody in that group worked together to chase down Stefan Kung. I think there was a little rise at the end that kind of he didn't adjust well to, or maybe just kind of got kind of some blood in the water for the chasers. It really it really felt like from that moment it was a foregone conclusion that he would.
They can also see you, which makes it much harder. Like, you're right up the road, you know. This
course has had many separate finishes through the years, and I feel like this one was a little bit more open than others. I know the finishing straight itself seemed pretty similar, but it felt a little bit more, I don't know. I felt like they had a line of sight on him for a long time, even when it looked like he was going to win the race. He was very much in sight.
They were still in sight, yeah. All right, so then he gets caught, at which point it seems like, okay, Alpecin's all along the plan was apparently to set up the sprint.
I mean, that's what makes sense, right? That's the first thing you're thinking of is there's a big group. There's a group sprint at the end of Omloop Nice, which is very unusual.
Yeah, I mean, it happens, but it's not normal.
Yeah. And Jasper Philipsen is in it, and he's like clearly the fastest guy in this group on paper.
And I think the other rider whose plan worked on the day was Paul Magne, because the quick I think the Soudal quick step plan is let someone else manage this, so that Paul Magne can come to a reduced sprint or whatever size his sprint is.
I mean, that sort of was default what happened with Quickstep, I feel like.
Yeah, maybe so. I mean, we on the Spin Cycle podcast this week didn't give them enough credit. Magne himself, very strong. The rest of the team, question marks. Yep. But Magne was there. Philipsen was there. Wout van Aert was there. Those are the 3 riders that we expect to contest the sprint, and you got a great overhead of them coming in. We're watching, these are the guys we're going to key in on the sprint. They're all right next to each other, one behind the other. It wasn't that trio that actually contested the sprint. Do you want to break down the sprint now that we're here in the moment?
Why don't we jump to the sprint video?
Yeah. So, all right, we're pulling it up here.
Yep. So imagine, if you will, you're looking at a helicopter shot of the finale of Omloop Nieuwsblad. In this roughly the center of frame is Wout van Aert in his yellow shirt and his Red Bull helmet, and right on his wheel is Jasper Philipsen, and right to his right is Søren Warensholt, kind of in a clump of riders at the front of the field. Not a super great place if you're looking to jump out, but a very good spot if you're looking to not eat wind. And you'll see that eventually we're about 250 meters out, 300 meters out. Wow. At 250 meters, you'll see Philipsen start to go, and he's out. He's fully exposed in the wind. Wout van Aert is not really interested in contesting the sprint, as far as I could tell, but Warensholt remains behind two, arguably three other guys now. So he's got a really good draft. Philipsen now out on his own, fully pumping. And finally, we see Warensholt kind of come out of the draft. We're inside 150 meters, it looks
like. That's like 5 seconds at least of Philipsen eating wind.
Not only that, but remember I mentioned that there are guys kind of coming back. We have Vacek from Lidl Trek bumping into what I believe is Monnier. Is that how you pronounce his name?
I think, yeah, we're gonna go with that. And if you're French and you're listening and we're wrong, feel free to tell us. If you're a member, if you're not a member, I don't know how much I care. So I hope a French person tells us who's a member, because that's what I want in the comments here on Discord. By the way, in the middle of this breakdown. I want to just tell people, if you want to tell us how you feel, or if you want to ask us questions, be on our Discord and be a member, and we will get to those questions here in a bit. All right, back to the sprint. You got Philipsen about what looks like about to hit the front, but that's not what happens.
No, I mean he's trying to hit the front. He's
trying.
Even with Warensholt. Monier's behind both of them, but he's bumping and can't really move. And you'll see it's just Philipsen has already put in this effort, and Warensholt's been able to accelerate in the draft. So he's coming out with the same speed that Philipsen has to put in watts to earn. And he started a little bit in front of him, and Philipsen never really pulls even. And, there's the three of them. Monier's just coming around at like 100 meters. The three of them are side by side. And for some reason, maybe 10, 20, let's say 20 meters from the line, inside of 25 meters, Philipsen throws his bike.
Yeah, this amazing still. Where you've frozen it here is perfect. Because that is not the line.
No, we are not even at the logo right before the line. There's a Proximus logo, a KBC logo, and the finish line. Philipsen is throwing his bike on the Proximus logo. You roll it forward, you'll see all of them take extra pedal strokes. Maybe a little bit too far forward there. You can see, he is just given away. If he had any chance of getting to the front, which I don't think he did, he gave it away throwing the bike there.
Yeah.
And Monnier,
maybe he was just tired, and
it's a long bike race, and he went
throw
for
the
a long
bike
way.
Here, and people will say, "Oh, you threw the bike early," and not, "Oh, you're not very good." So maybe it's just 40 chess. I don't know.
But uphill sprint, headwind, it really felt colossally overconfident. And part of it is he doesn't have any more riders in front of him to set him up for a perfect lead out, but part of it is he just didn't execute very well. And that bike throw kind of shows it. Monnier gets around him really easily, but can't make up the difference he gave up at the beginning of the sprint. Warensholt holds on and takes it. And, he's a big guy. He's 6'1"-ish, pretty strong, pretty large.
Yeah.
And it's that kind of day, that kind of sprint, he was in the right spot, ideally positioned. But it kind of leads into, maybe some of our discussion points.
Yes. I think one of the people on Discord asked a question that I think is a really good way to frame the race, which is this to me felt more like, often we wonder after a race, was this more of a how the race was won or a how the race was lost situation? And hopefully with this doesn't come across as disrespecting Søren Warensholt, but this does feel like a how the race was lost, because it seems like Alpecin, this seems to have been their plan. We can't know that, but it seems to have been their plan to bring it all together for a sprint. But then they just didn't know what to do in the actual sprint. They had a guy. There were riders. There were teammates of sprinters, not just from Alpecin, from other teams as well. Visma being one of them, at the front in the last 600 meters or so. They were not with their sprinters, though. So the sprinters were detached from their lead-out riders. They had to do their own thing. And as we saw, for Philipsen, that meant eating wind, significantly more wind than Warensholt ended up eating.
But I think a lot of them just weren't planning on a sprint. You saw Jesper Stuyven leading out Vacek for Lidl Trek. It was,
right, which is weird because Stuyven can sprint. He's won a Vuelta points jersey, maybe. Certainly Vuelta stages.
It just felt like, despite the fact that through the entire race, everyone was like, okay, we're here, we're in the front group, we're ready to do stuff.
Yeah,
but none of them were actually like, we have a real plan to do this sprint, to do this lead out.
Raphael on Discord says we did say Monye correctly, so that's good. That's
Ah,
good. Thank you, Raphael. Let's talk takeaways because that's the. I mean, after all of this, what are we left with? Because that is at the end of the day, the envelope is just the first. It's the first of the Cobbled Classics. There's a whole month of Cobbled Classics left, slightly more than a month. We've got Sanremo and Strade Bianche as well, other not quite Cobbled Classics, but and I think there's several talking points from today. The first one that's on my mind is very similar to last year when we saw Jan Tratnik win. And that is, what does this mean for the rider who won? I mean, are we going to see him do a lot more? I feel like I feel like more so than Jan Tratnik, this is a statement from Soren Varnskild. This isn't really a, I happen to be a good rider on the best team situation, which is what Tratnik was. Tratnik, I'm not expecting to go win more classics. Just to be blunt, I don't think Tratnik's going to go out there and win a bunch more classics. Varnskild, maybe he wins against Wevelgem now. Now he's proven that he can survive a tough day and win a sprint. Not a favorite, certainly not going to be a favorite over Jasper Philipsen. But this was a pretty Herculean, individual effort. His team was there, 40K out. We saw him at the front a little bit. But this was a lot of Soren Varnskild being great at sprinting, being great at positioning, because you saw him. And he said this in the interview after. He had initially planned to go, I think he said to his left, but he followed on the right. And if you watch the overhead, you can see he's actually kind of far back. There's several riders in front of him with about 200 meters to go. He follows, I think, it's hard to say for certain, but I think he was following Lewis Askey. Maybe there were one or two other riders in front of him. And then it really just opened up for him.
yep.
And it ended up being perfect position.
A little bit lucky.
He did.
Like you saw what happened to Monye. So
Yes.
that could have just as easily happened to him, and it would have been
Absolutely.
a much harder ask for him to get back up to speed.
Yeah.
I think this is also kind of a credit to Uno X's team building. Like this is a team that is still not World Tour. That's their goal. But like they basically were like, hey, you're a strong dude. You're from Denmark and or Norway. Let's come out, ride hard, and we'll put you in positions where maybe you can do stuff. I mean, they obviously have plans around guys like Magnus Cort, but this is this is sort of how Quickstep used to be, where you had just a bunch of strong dudes and people who could perform from a variety of situations, got them results. And even when, it wasn't a Tom Bonen day, you could still get your Yves Lampaert victory.
And you mentioned Magnus Cort. We should point out when earlier this week, the 10 people who got your notification that you were live on YouTube will know this. We did briefly we did like a little test show earlier in the week just to make sure everything was working. And we tested talking about Gran Camino, where we saw Uno X just crushing everybody. You called them big fish, small pond. This is a bigger pond. And
I raised the question of whether are they a big fish or is this a small pond?
I think at this point we got to say that the fish it's a respectable size. I mean, they just won on the Pet Spot, so good on you, Soren Varnskild. And let's change the topic a little bit to the rest of the field that everyone expected to win, because Varnskild probably as big, got to be more of an outsider to win this race than Jan Tratnik was last year, and that's saying something.
Yeah, with that.
So what do I mean, Visma UAE going in were the favorites. All the talk was about Visma UAE and maybe to some extent Arnaud Delis. And I think Visma and UAE really just dropped the ball. But I mean, does that matter? Are we concerned? Is it going to mean anything 2 weeks from now? Yeah, I don't know.
I almost feel like Visma was trying to break up the race without making a big investment in breaking it up. There was a lot of like, Wout van Aert would let a gap open and look behind him in a situation where, unless you're totally gassed or you're trying to wear out someone who looks super strong, it wouldn't make that much sense. Take 3 pedal strokes, hold the wheel, then you're right at the front. And when Jorgensen gets caught, you don't have to ride past 7 other dudes to make a counterattack. I also kind of wonder what UAE was up to. Because they did a lot of stuff.
Navais looked good when he looked good. Like in the moments where he decided to show up, he looked good. But they didn't really seem to have a plan. I don't know. What were they thinking?
I mean, they're for the past 18 months now, they basically have been like, let's just pick a spot and ride hard, and then Tadej Pogačar will win a race.
Yes.
And I think maybe jokingly, somewhat jokingly, but also kind of seriously, they have not been like, how do we, what are some scenarios that we can put together where we win this race? How do we put our guys in situations where they can win? It's a little harder to think about that when you have constantly been like, well, just ride hard and then Tade will win the race.
That guy will take care of it. Well, they did actually ride really hard from, what was it, like 50K out? You saw him at the front.
Oh, they ran it back at 92K to go. Like legit.
Okay, there we go.
Like,
yeah. Yeah.
And Visma was out of position and they didn't do anything. So like, it's 92K to go.
Yeah. Well, it was the sort of thing where maybe Pogacar goes from there because
this was the Pogacar test. This was training for a later classic where they're going to have Pogacar.
But it's like, maybe Jonathan Narvaez is not that guy. So why? Anyway, yeah, maybe they're just training. I'm not too worried. I think UAE will still have a favorite for Flanders, put it that way, because of this guy we're talking about.
Yep.
What about Pidcock?
I thought at like 30K to go, I thought he was going to win this race. He had done in a race that was really defined by the work that other people had done. Stefan Kung actually was off the back a little bit earlier. De Lee had that horrible series of, fighting to get back on right as the race kicked back up. We'd seen UAE do stuff. We'd seen Fiesma do stuff. We'd seen all these teams get involved. And Pidcock was, I think the biggest thing we saw him do was change his shoe at the back of the field. To me, that's like danger, right? It's like, you couldn't, part of it is he is much smaller than a lot of the other guys. So you never saw him except this, little Red Bull helmet in the wrong kit would kind of poke up through the space between the riders. I'm like, he's just going to nuke it up the mirror. And it never happened. He was in a great position at the bottom of it. And, I don't know if he just wasn't on his game today or if he's looking more at the hillier classics later in the season. But it seemed like a great setup. And then for whatever reason, kind of cruised in.
Yeah. Didn't really do much with it. All right. I do want to talk about the non-Varenskjold performances that I think are positive for the future. I hate that word in cycling, that are good for the future. Varenskjold being the obvious one. But there are others as well. And I want to say, in a way, I think Philipsen comes out of this. He's a sprinter. He wants to win everything. I don't think he's happy. But I think he has reasons to be confident, at least. Because I thought he looked really good at the moments where you maybe wouldn't have expected him to look quite as good. I think you expect him to look good in the sprint. He looked great on the Mur. He looked great on the climbs. The team itself did a good job of controlling the race in a way that you generally expect a Visma or a UAE to do. So there are good takeaways for the Alpecin team. They just didn't really deliver. And I think Philipsen can at least say to himself, all right, well, a month from now, I was already in this shape to be here, and hopefully I'll be even better by then. And when it comes time to contest this, the Tour of Flanders or Roubaix, I think he'll have the confidence that he was able to do that today. At
I think he had the confidence. I mean, he didn't have the legs.
Maybe too much. A little bit too much.
To dial it back a little bit,
True. Kung, the other one. Stefan Kung looked great. One of the other ones. Stefan Kung looked great when he went on the attack. The timing was perfect. It didn't work out, but I think to me, he was the closest to winning the race that didn't win. Him more so than Monnier at the finish line. Kung could have won if things had played out a little differently. And he timed it well. I think he's got to be happy. And then also, Lidl Trek looked pretty good with Matthias Vacek. And we heard a couple people. I mean, Tom Squinch was telling us, hyping up his teammates. And I think they proved to be pretty good. They looked good today. I mean, the fact that it ended in a sprint was not good for them. I think that's not what they wanted to happen. But I don't think most people expected to see Lidl Trek at the front as much as we saw them on some of the key moments of the race. So again, looking ahead to the classics, watch out for Vacek and Toms, because Toms was up there as well. Jasper Stuyven, and then Mess Peterson wasn't in another race. So like that core group of riders for Lidl Trek probably taking some confidence out of today. At the end of the day, Soren Varenskjold. I mean, there's no other way to say it. He stunned the whole peloton. I believe he was the only Uno X rider in that like lead group. He had a teammate that got him there. So I don't know if they maybe finished on the same time, but his teammate was like not in the top 25. I know that.
Abrahamson was definitely there. I think may have been the first non-Alpecin to pull through. He's very like Uno X committed to like chasing the chase very early in the process.
Yeah.
And he it's interesting to think, if he had been there in touch and gone up the road with Stefan Cook, like they could have stayed away. And I think that's a pretty reasonable 2-up sprint. Like they both could commit to that, not thinking that they were going to lose.
So what you're saying is maybe Uno X had a better day than I'm even giving them credit for. They ended up in good positions at the right time, which is what matters. Yeah. Okay. Takeaways done. Unheralded riders. I've got two for me. The first is Brent Van Moor, and it's not because I think we're going to see Brent Van Moor winning a classic anytime soon. But if you watch the last 30 seconds, with like 300 meters to go, he's kind of way back there, and he ended up clawing his way to 4th place. Is that going to be something that he tells his grandkids about? Probably not. But is that something that a second division team cares about? Yeah, it is. 4th place in a World Tour Classic. Also, in a sprint and a stage race, nobody cares about 4th place. But if it's a one-day classic, 4th place is cool. Then you're a top 10, top 5 in a one-day classic. Brent Van Moor went from what I would have guessed. If you ask me, hey, where's he going to finish? I'm thinking like 15th with 300 meters to go. And he just perfectly weaved his way to 4th, which, again, it matters if you're a second division team. The other rider, one who I think this is more of a performance that has me wondering if we're going to see a lot more of him in the future, is Lukáš Kubíš of the Unibet Titimo Rockets. The Slovakian national champion, just 25 years old, signed with the team this year, and he was on the front quite frequently. You saw him near the front, maybe not at the front, but you saw him going over the Mur, right behind all the heavy hitters. And still there at the sprint, finished 6th in the end. I think Varnskod was actually behind him at one point, and Varnskod got to take advantage of a little bit of draft at one point of his, I think. And the fact that he was there on the key, the choke points, still there at the sprint, still finished 6th. And again, for a second division team, getting a top 10 in a World Tour Classic, I mean, it's a big deal. It might not seem like a big deal, but I remember I talked to Doug Ryder from Q36.5 earlier this year for a piece over at EscapeCollective.com, and he was mentioning a couple of points like, oh yeah, we were top 20 in this or that classic last year. And it gives you a sense of like, oh, they care enough to remember that is something worth mentioning. So we are going to talk mostly about who's finishing first, second, third, but like 6th in a World Tour Classic definitely matters to a Unibet Titimo Rockets. And so good on you, Lukáš Kubíš, and I do think we're going to see more of him in the coming weeks. And Unibet Titimo got quite a lot of invites as well. So we're going to see the team in general a lot more. Any others from you?
I thought Tim Van Dijken looked really good. I think he was in positions. I think he was really a lieutenant today. There were a couple times where he got in a group and was like, sorry, I can't pull through. And then after Tratnik flatted, he was one of the guys who got clear, kind of trying to chase onto Kung. And just, he was in the right spot at the right time. I think just the team strategy and the situation of the race counted against him, but I definitely have my eye on him this classic season.
For the future. Yeah. All right. We've given our talking points. We've talked to our unheralded riders. Let's go to some questions from the folks on Discord. By the way, thank you for following along on Discord. And if you're watching on YouTube or Instagram, because we have so many different platforms, this is where we're checking the comments. So apologies if we haven't responded to you, but also become a member. That's all it takes. It's not that hard. Just go to escapecollective.com and sign up. Right. The Northern Rights, we mentioned you earlier, and how this is a great framework is how many races are lost rather than won. And this did feel, with respect to Soren Warrenskild, like a race that was lost by the sprinter teams that were not Uno X. I like Cafe Rider's way of looking at this. In the absence of the big two long-range attackers, which are Pogacar and MVDP, I'd put
Remco Erasure.
I'd put Remco up there as well, but maybe not an Unblood Newsblad. Are these races to back your sprinter? And I think that's a really good way of looking at it. Today, it seemed like UAE, like we've talked about, was still operating like they had a Pogacar. Maybe they had more confidence in Jonathan Narvaez than they should have had. But yes, if I am a separate team, if I'm Uno X, certainly. And yeah, if I'm Alpecin de Koning, this is, without Matthew Vanderpool, this is the race you set up for a sprint. So it seems like the way to do it. I agree with that. I don't know. Am I wrong? Should we give more credit to the likes of Jan Tratnik and the other guys who can get away that are not Van der Poel and Pogacar?
I mean, I think part of it is you don't expect Umlopet Nisplat to be a sprint. Ronan in the Slack was like, this is a bad one because it ended in a sprint.
Yeah.
Traditionally, this is the race that breaks up, and then Kuurne Brussels Kuurne is the sprint that you have to break up, And I think, not a lot of people brought super strong sprinters to this team. Maybe in the team bus meeting, they said, hey, if it's a sprint, you're the guy. Which, great, you take that memo on the bus, and then at 60K to go, you have to close a gap. And then at 50K to go, you have to close another gap. And then.
Yeah, I mean, Arnaud Delis, you would have thought this is the perfect scenario for him.
Yes. Although he didn't look great.
No, he did. Well, that's what I'm saying. Like, you would have thought this was going to be great, and he did not look great.
Yep. He had bad luck, too.
He had really bad luck, yeah, which is tough. But he also just didn't look the best. So I'm maybe, I mean, at the end of the day, like, not every race works out perfectly. So there's that.
I think, too, Philipsen is just such a prohibitive favorite in a situation like this.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, he won Roubaix, right? He can ride classics. He's also a great group sprinter.
Yeah, he won San Remo, was second Roubaix, right? So, yeah.
Yes, sorry. Thank you.
But yeah, now you would think, and all eyes are on them at all times, and they were today, and they rode like it. They rode like all eyes were on them. So, yeah. Let's check to see if there's any others. More from Cafe Rider, but it is wondering how Alpecin is spinning this. It's been a rough year so far. I mean, Philipsen just not looking as fast as you would have expected. However, he did say it's all about the classics, and I think what he meant by that is probably that it's all about San Remo and beyond.
Mm-hmm. Yep, they have high standards.
Yeah.
It's March. It's literally the first day of March. I think it's tough to be having a
no. We got to have the hottest takes right now. First show. Yeah.
Sorry. Basically, Alpecin. Basically, their season ended at UAE Tour.
Yeah. Exactly.
Just everything bad. Boo. Didn't. I don't know.
Yep. Yeah. I think.
Where were they at Tour Down Under, Dan?
I think it. Well, yeah. Good point. And UAE dominated that race. Yeah. Real quick, we should not leave without mentioning the wacky outcome of the women's race, which Wheel Talk will cover a lot more. We're going to leave it to Wheel Talk to break down the action later this week. But while we're here, not exactly what most people. I think the third, fourth, fifth was maybe the trio you would have expected to be first, second, third. Not what happened. And just a couple of minutes in between the two winners and the riders everyone expected to win.
They weren't quite ready to start the season today.
I guess not. Well, a lot of Claes was taking a big win for Arkea, which is not something that we say often on the men's or women's side.
Ouch! Ouch!
Which I'm happy about because
there goes your B&B hotel discount.
I love their kit. I am a Bianchi rider myself, so love everything about Arkea. I mean, last year's kit was even better because they went with that like Arthurian legend vibe. Anyway, the fact that they won today is just not something that we get to say very often. But yeah, 31-year-old Lotte Kleis was, I mean, in the right place at the right time and took the win. It's hard to argue with the tactics of, hey, get in the break because sometimes it works. Yeah, I mean, what? Again, we're gonna leave it to Wheel Talk, but why did this end this way? Why were the rest of the peloton 3 minutes back?
I can only assume that. Well, I mean, 3 minutes was a fraction of how big was like 17 minutes when the cameras kicked on?
Yeah,
something enormous. Like
it was enormous, but also it was one of those things where even then I'm thinking like, well, surely they're going to catch this, right? It
17 is a lot of minutes.
17 is a lot. That's true. Yeah. I don't know. We don't know. And that's the other thing about recording right after. I mean, I also want to know on the men's side, I want to know the story of Soren Varnskjold swapping in for Marcus Holgaard. We'll find out. By Monday, we'll know. But yeah, right now, all we know is that he wasn't supposed to race. He did. I'd say it worked out pretty well for Uno X. We'll talk. I have more on the women's race and tune into that later. We'll have this show or, the audio of it in the podcast sphere early next week. For those of you who are watching live, thanks for tuning in. We did very little promo for this, kind of because we want to treat this like the first show. We weren't sure how it's going to go. I feel like we went pretty well, and I hope you enjoyed it. To those of you commenting on Discord, appreciate you. We'll have more as the season progresses, there's a pretty cool race coming up next week in Italy. They go on some white roads where there is gravel. We'll be back for that. Anything else, Cosmo? Were there any big moments that we've missed? Or have we actually done a pretty good job? I'm nervous that we missed something because it's our first show. But
Rasmus Tiller was caught up in a crash and didn't get back in. And I made a joke that Uno X would be rudderless without Tiller, which nobody noticed.
Okay, that is
it turned out not to be true. So
yeah, but it's still, I like your wordplay. And it could, yeah, I mean that could have been a good alternate headline for today. Not rudderless without Tiller, but I think you had a really chef's kiss.
Thank you.
No, headline for today. So excellent work. We'll be back in a week. Shout out to Bianca. In the meantime, this audio will go up somewhere. The video will be up somewhere. We're doing this. We're doing it live. We're hopefully we'll figure all this stuff out, and there will be Spin Cycle and Wheel Talk and all the other good stuff from Escape Collective. If you are not a member, go sign up. Just do it. Just go do it so we can keep doing these live post-race shows. And if you are a member, we thank you and we appreciate you. Cafe Rider, Jordan W, Raphael, just going through the list of you, Alden Koppenberg, everybody's talking to us right now. Thank you. Thanks for following along.
There's people talking on my YouTube channel, and they're
right. And to you, and also to
you should probably be on the Escape Collective YouTube channel.
So also to the Instagram. Yeah, we're gonna get that up. Don't worry.
We had some YouTube reasons.
We're figuring this all out on the fly. So in the moment, we're only checking the Discord. So if you're commenting on Instagram, hi Dan Benson, good to see you. I saw you comment there. But yeah, Discord. That's where we're getting comments for now. So by next week, hopefully we'll have more stuff figured out. We'll give you more information ahead of time about where we're going to be. In the meantime, enjoy the week. Thanks for joining us. I'm Dane Cash, and who are you? What was this?
I'm Cosmo Catalano. That was the How the Race Was Won podcast.